Hello, everyone. Welcome to Achieving Success with Olivia Akin. I'm your host, Olivia Akin. Each week, we will discuss the roadmap of achieving your personal and professional success. We will give you real-life stories on growing personally and professionally to achieve your life and career goals with the help of some top-notch guests. Today, we are speaking with Mark Troy. Mark is currently working for the Princeton Mercer Chamber of Commerce as an event coordinator. You can find Mark on LinkedIn by searching Mark Troy. Hello, Mark. It's fantastic having you on the show today.
Hi, Olivia. How are you?
I'm good. To start off the show, can you tell me what success means and looks like to Mark Troy?
Sure. The first thing that comes to mind, there's a quote by Jim Carrey. He says, I wish that everybody gets rich and famous and gets everything that they've ever dreamed of just so that they know it's not the answer. And I, for a very long time, thought success was going to be monetary. And I thought it was going to be everything that, that I wanted tangibly. Anyways, and that's not the case. Success for me has turned into um, the circle that I have in my professional and my personal life. Waking up and feeling energized and engaged by what I get to do every day. And if I have that, whilst also being able to support myself and my family, then to me that is success.
And I really like how you mentioned being engaged because I think that's really important for people to understand is you can go through the motions, but if you're not engaged in it, you're not there, you're not present, what real value is that bringing you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you're not living in the moment authentically,
Mhm.
I get into so many meetings with people, where we talk for weeks over email. We're so excited to get into this meeting. We get into it and they're not even there, right? And so we get so excited about these long-term goals and all of these things, especially with planning events for a living. You have this big date and that's going to be, that's what we're all working towards. But if we're not making connections and building relationships on the way there, um, it's I get colleagues together or professionals together to build a panel, and I can't really get them to even, do icebreakers and build conversation and relationship ahead of time, because they're just so focused on getting to that date. And then we get there, and you would have thought they never met before. So,
Mhm.
it's really really important to be in the present moment and keep yourself, you know, really centered in that.
And I think that's important too. And one thing I try to do, a trick in that is no matter what's going on, because everyone will always have something going on, right? Life isn't always a perfect timeline. There's never a perfect right time for anything. And if things are going well today, that doesn't mean something can happen tomorrow that just throws a whole curveball
Right.
in your plan. So when those hard moments happen for me, or I completely have to shift from one area to another, I kind of try to regroup. I give myself a minute and I'm like, okay, that's what's happening, but that situation can't affect this situation or what's happening with that group of people and maybe their attitudes or, whatever it might be can't affect how I interact with someone else. So I try to like regroup myself, put myself in that mindset and be like, okay, put on a brave face. Sometimes you just have to put on the brave face and
Absolutely.
go from there cuz there can be things definitely going on in your personal life that it's hard to take a step back and go, okay, like that's really a bad, stressful moment. But you don't want to ruin the other relationships along the way because of that.
Absolutely. And that, of course, a huge topic right now about work-life balance, trying to find that middle ground where you feel like you're giving equal halves of yourself.
Mhm.
I personally struggle with especially with living in the moment. To me, my entire life intertwines. So having personal struggles and not bringing them to work has always been difficult because I'm so passionate about bringing my personal experience into my professional space.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, trying to stay in the present moment and allowing your personal life to be a motivator as opposed to having a direct effect on your day to day, I think makes a world of difference.
Oh, for sure. And the other part of that too is when something bad happens or something you don't expect to happen, whether that's in work and you're doing other things or that's personally, what you have to say, and it touches upon what you just mentioned, is really how can this lift me up? The big thing happening right now in our country is mass layoffs. It's affecting a lot of people. And um I wasn't expecting to say this, but I always get my guests to say things on the show, so I guess I should be not surprised that I get myself to do it too. Um I worked for Lockheed Martin while starting this company, and Lockheed Martin is currently in the position of doing mass layoffs. So last week, we're filming this on a Friday, and it will be airing quickly during my transition time. But I was one of the people that got a mass layoff. And the surprise in that, and trying to pivot and not knowing how to interact with coworkers who might also be laid off. They don't know how to really interact with you because there is that transition time. And Lockheed's been great. They are, it wasn't something where they're laying people off and then they're like, okay, you're out the door today. And I will really give them props for doing that. They're giving people time to still stay within the company and they're giving everyone resources. But the irony in that was I worked that day and found out, and then I actually did a podcast recording that night. And I had to really, when we talk about having to switch, because this is a business, this is a company, it's growing, it's thriving, you really have to say in the moment, okay, now that one thing's happening, that transition is happening, but I can't let those emotions affect everything else.
Of course, and that's a prime example of allowing it to motivate you, right?
Mhm.
You are very lucky in the fact that you do run your own company, and so now you'll be able to put your energy in that. Of course, not everybody has that to fall back on when they get
Right.
laid off, but that now becomes the motivator of, okay, you know what? Yeah, I did get laid off, but I can now put 100% of my time into what I'm
Yeah.
really passionate about. I had an experience with that last spring. I hurt my back very badly. And it was last April. And at the time I was doing real estate, it was before I transitioned into the nonprofit world and I wasn't happy where I was at. But as a lot of people in their 20s, right, you get onto a career path and you think, well, this is where all my experience is. So you ride on that
Mhm.
train. And it wasn't until I was forced to be home and I was forced to not do real estate because it's hard showing people houses when you can't walk and spin around and do all those fun things that I really pushed myself into figuring out what made me happy and what I really wanted to do. Um, and so, although that recovery from that back injury was not easy, I have that back injury to thank for pushing me into the nonprofit space. I don't think I would have made that jump if I was comfortable, and that's something that, especially being in recovery, um, I constantly try to be comfortable being uncomfortable. If I'm sitting pretty and I feel comfortable and everything, I'm good. I'm, 9 to 5, everything's going smoothly. I automatically a red flag goes up and I was like, something's going wrong. It's too, so I constantly have to push myself out of my comfort zone to keep myself engaged.
And I think that's an important thing to do as well. Sometimes, and realize it, because sometimes in moments of, unforeseen circumstances, right? I didn't go into work Tuesday thinking by the end of the day I would be
Right.
told, I wasn't working. And in your case, you probably started your day off the day you got injured and didn't think you would not be able to go and show houses.
Right.
And there can be many situations or many different circumstances in where something comes up. A family member gets sick and now you're a primary caregiver. It can be whatever it might be, but those moments of having to really take a step back, analyze the situation, and whether you like it or not, you got to just keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And I think one thing I recently heard, and I think it's a great thing to do for your mental self and as well as a reflection, is a therapist told someone, my mom's a therapist and she heard this and she passed it along to me. But she said, write down, during these layoffs or these situations that might be happening, write a thank you note. And the person was like, why would I write a thank you note? Like, I just lost my job, or now this horrible situation's happening to me. Why would I write a thank you note? And she said, write a thank you note for your experiences and everything you're feeling today. And in a year, open that note and read it. Because what can happen in a year, what can happen in a week can dramatically change, your projection and where you're going and everything else. And that woman ended up opening a business, and that woman, always wanted to open a clothing store, ended up never doing it. And the situation allowed her to open it. And a year later, she's making all this revenue. It's very successful store. And she even said, if it wasn't for that situation, I would have never taken a step back, analyzed things, and just gone for it. Sometimes, like you said, it's those little moments.
Absolutely, 100%. And it's funny that you brought up the thank you notes. It makes me think of when I got into recovery about a year and a half ago from drugs and alcohol. Um, I had a mentor tell me, you don't have a drug and alcohol problem, you have a people problem. And uh, person number one being myself. And so anybody that had an issue with, and a lot of the people that I had an issue with happened to be in professional spaces. And it's not because they were doing anything particularly wrong. It was because anything that I saw in anybody professionally that I didn't like about myself, I automatically took out on them because they reminded me of me or something I wasn't doing or something that I wasn't comfortable with in a place that I wanted to be professionally. So uh, he made me start to write down why I liked these people so much. Just extreme, they're the best. They work so hard and they do X, Y, and Z. And what ended up happening, on top of the fact that I stopped being resentful towards my coworkers, was that I started to be a lot kinder to myself. I started
Mhm.
to be a lot kinder of the mistakes that I was making and um, not falling on my sword just because I made an error. Because we're human, right? These things are going to happen. But getting past that, the guilt and shame that we have of this grind of our 20s. God forbid you take off a Friday because you just need a mental
Mhm.
health day, or anything. I don't know about you, but every time I go on vacation, I can't get off my email. I can't do it. I feel so bad not being at work. So trying to get rid of that guilt, I
Mhm.
think feeds my professional life by allowing myself personal time and by allowing myself kindness for not being perfect in my professional life and in my work life. I'm more successful and more present when I am at work.
Mhm. And I think that's so important. And I love when you talked about that and writing down what you liked about the people. Listen, I think everyone should do that. I'm going to
Yeah,
start doing that. When I
it's
get
good.
frustrated at people, I'm going to start writing that down. I think that's a really healthy tool that anyone could use in any situation, whether it's work situation or personally, because whether it is something where, okay, you're kind of outward reflecting how you feel about yourself onto others, or your opinions that you might be feeling about yourself, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, or it's simply a situation of you're just so frustrated in the moment.
Yeah.
Doing that can then help you kind of take away the feelings, maybe lay some things out, and it can help you work through things in the long run as well. And I just think that's a great tool to use because it can really take away some perspectives as well, or gain perspectives about situations or yourself or how you might perceive something. That allows you to also say, how am I perceiving the situation? Is this really what I'm seeing, or is there other things in play as well? The other thing I think was a key point you brought up there was talking about the work life balance, and it is intertwined, especially when you're very passionate about something. It can be hard to separate that. And when you're very busy, it can be hard to separate what's going on in one aspect of your life with how something else is playing out. And one thing I've tried to do is a while ago, kind of like you with the emails, I was very like, okay, emails, texts, like if something came in, I was answering right away, no matter how busy I was. And um, for me, that really stemmed from years ago. The one time I didn't pick up my phone, it
Of
was,
course.
yeah, something really bad happened. And I was the only person they had contact with. So after like the third call, I picked up, and it was finding out my sister was injured and they couldn't get a hold of my parents. And I had to get a hold of my parents. And from that day forward, for years, I mean, until like recently, like COVID made me like take a step back.
Yeah.
Anytime anyone would text or call me, no matter what I was doing, even if I was in class in college, which I'm not gonna lie, my teachers kind of got annoyed at sometimes. They're like, Olivia, put your phone away. And I'm like, let me just see what it is. Let me at least just see what it is. And so it always aggravated me at times when other people wouldn't respond right away, or people wouldn't, get back to you. And it's something I've worked through because I'm like, they might be busy. For years it was, well, why aren't they answering? Like, what's going on? Is there an issue with me? Is it an issue? Like, what's the situation? And finally, especially during COVID, kind of with you with your letters and everything else, I started going, okay, my phone's gonna be upstairs. I'm gonna be downstairs eating dinner. The phone's not gonna come with me. If you text me or call me, like, I'll read it when I go back upstairs. And now sometimes people be like, I didn't hear from you for like 2 hours. And I was like, well, I was doing stuff. Like when we record, like I said to Mark right before we recorded, the phone's turning off. It's going in a drawer. And sometimes you just have to do that in order to disconnect, or say, even when I'm on vacation, I'll get texts and emails. And as a leader of different organizations, I read them. I will read them, but I'll say, does this need my time right in this moment? If
Right.
not, you're not getting a response. If someone else in the email chain can answer the question, then and that's their area, they'll answer you. And I even said that to someone yesterday. There was an email. They immediately then picked up the phone and called me as the president of the organization. And I said, he will email you back in 5 minutes. I said, I'm not even in the same state with him. I don't have the access to what he's doing. I said, if it doesn't get out in the next 10 minutes, it's okay. I said, he will email you. And that was it. Like, I didn't start calling people up, which maybe I would have done years ago. But at the same point, you kind of have to take a step back and say, as a leader, as someone in the professional realm as well, let other people do things. You got to
Yes.
delegate.
Absolutely. And I compare it to penny stocks and long-term investments, right? So I see an email come in, and very similarly, right? These alarms go off in my head. But whoever I'm with in that present moment, that I'm
Mhm.
trying to build a connection with, whether that's my fiance or someone that I'm trying to do business with. Not giving them my full attention,
Mhm.
I'm only hurting myself, right?
Mhm.
And that long-term investment to answer an email about something that probably could have easily been looked up elsewhere or could have waited, right? But
Mhm.
to your point about your situation with your sister, that's why it's so, you know, that that's the main piece I struggle with work-life balance, is that to me, my life is a whole pie, right? And it's naive to think that our personal experiences, our personal traumas, mental health, physical health, family situations aren't going to come into the workplace.
Mhm.
Um, when I first started in real estate, it was like turning on a switch. I'd show up to work and I was robotic and I
Mhm.
wasn't me at all because I thought that's who I needed to be in order to be successful. And it wasn't until I started to be myself and laugh and goof around in good measure, right? That I started to be successful. I realized that who I was in my personal life was a strength that needed to be allocated in my
Mhm.
professional life. And so it's the main reason with getting sober, I I have this annoying habit, you might say, that I'm the guy that will go to a restaurant on the weekend and I start talking to the manager a little too much. Next thing I know, I'm like, I tell my fiance Tori, I'm like, maybe we should go into the restaurant business. You know, like maybe I should strike a deal with this guy. I'm really I'm always looking for something. That being said, I got sober and I'm a very passionate person. And immediately I said, okay, I did this. Let me help other men get through it, other women
Mhm.
get through it, other people get through it. And so I became a house manager for a sober house, and I did that for 8 or 9 months. The Whilst doing that, also working in real estate, right? So you're a live-in house manager, and you're up with these guys until midnight, 1 a.m., making sure they get in on time and talking to them through their problems, then getting up at 6 and driving down to South Jersey and, being at the leasing office all day and you burn out very quickly. You burn out very quickly. So it was really it became a crossroads where how do I how do I meld wanting to help people with the fact that obviously I need to be able to support myself and support my growing family and all of these things. So getting sober, having that back injury, and finding a way to safely get into a new space. It's not like I jumped and went back and got a different degree or anything, but finding the chamber, which allows me to put my hands in a few different pots, a few of which being, my nonprofit committee, my diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, my Trenton Economic Committee, refueling Trenton and refurbishing it. It allowed me to stay in business and use my strengths that I already had, which was the fact that I am at my best when I'm helping others,
Mhm.
while also putting my business experience to work.
And I
So
want to talk
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's
I want to talk about your experiences and your experiences with substance abuse and that whole transition because I think it's really important when we talk about finding yourself, struggles that can happen, the realization is talking about that because it is a part of your life. And I think it takes a lot of courage and strength to say, yes, I have a problem. Need to get help for this because a lot of people, when in that moment, don't know how to ask for help, don't want the help, don't want to realize there is a bigger problem. And sometimes their loved ones don't want to either. And so it can be very hard overall. For you, you struggled. What was that experience like? And what was your moment of, no, I really need to get help? What was that for you?
well, I'd be lying if I said it was a switch, right, or a certain day of the week that it happened. It was a grueling process. I'm a little more headstrong than my own good. And like everything else in life, I thought I could take it head on and deal with it myself, right? And whilst in college getting my degree, I got into a pretty bad car accident, and that started me by court order having to go to a rehab facility. I'd love to tell you that I went to that rehab facility and it all went grand and I got out and here we are, but that's not what happened. I got into that situation and immediately allowed the guilt and shame of being in that place and having to take a step back and having to go to rehab to push me farther down. And so it wasn't until I started to forgive myself and show myself kindness that I got better. I went into these spaces in these rehabs, and I would automatically say, "Oh, well, like I'm not as bad as that guy, or I'm not in his situation. I'm different." At the end of the day, the more that I tried to separate myself from everybody that was dealing with the same problem, the farther away I got from getting sober and being in recovery. So the defining moment was really just showing myself kindness. You know, the my excuses always were, well, if they had my problems, like they wouldn't be able to get sober. And if they dealt with the barriers I did, or came where I came from, or was in the industry that I'm in, they wouldn't be able to get sober. And the moment I stopped comparing and I started relating, things got a lot easier. So that was really the biggest push. That and something that I use now, even with emotions in business situations, is that whether it's a craving or an onset of a very high stakes emotion, that the peak of those emotions only lasts 7 minutes. So whether I'm freaking out about a deadline or I'm mad at a colleague, or even a year and a half sober, I still have cravings on some days. They come up randomly. I'll be driving in my car, you know. I remind myself it's only gonna last 7 minutes. I look at the clock and I say, all right, it's 10:29, for example. At 10:36, I'll be okay. And if I can make it through those 7 minutes, it's not going to be that hard. So all of these lessons that I learned along the way of getting sober, all these things that I thought were going to destroy my professional life, if it got out that I was in recovery, if it got out that I had a drug problem, I thought it would ruin me. And when in reality, when I put all of these tools that I learned into my professional space, I became so much stronger and so much more successful because of it. And that's why I really truly believe that our personal struggles and our personal triumphs is our biggest asset in our professional life. Because if we're not being authentic in ourselves, then how are we waking up engaged and excited and being fueled by feeling that we're successful on a daily basis? I feel like it's a facade if not.
And I think there were so many key points there I want to point out, and so
Right.
many things I want to elaborate on. One of the key things I really loved there was the 7 minutes. At the end of the day, when you want, maybe make a bad decision, personally or professionally, maybe send a text, you're feeling a
Right.
certain way, whatever it might be. And I'm going to start using that tool of saying to myself, before I send this, before I go off, wait the 7 minutes. In 7 minutes, you'll see if you really want to talk to that person. See if you really want to go and do the thing that you're thinking about doing at this time. That you're like, maybe I'll regret that. Whether it is a substance or it's maybe going back to let's a unhealthy relationship. Hey, let me
Yeah.
text that person, whether it's a spouse or it can be, a friendship. That was a healthy situation, but like I might be lonely. So let me, text that person or just reach out and see what the possibilities are. In 7 minutes from now, you might not feel that way. So just
Right.
let those emotions that peak for 7 minutes, and then in 7 minutes, go to yourself. Do I really want to do that? Is that really the choice you want to make? And I think over time, And like you said, after the 7 minutes, it starts to die down. Um, Another thing I want to talk about is how you worked through the fact that with your substance abuse and everything going on, that played a role in the decisions you were making and the outlooks you were having even during your experience. You touched upon that a little bit of you were sitting there in the beginning going, well, that person's not as bad as me, like they won't be able to handle it, and this and that. And whether it's going through the process or, sometimes when emotions take a ride, you're like, you want to be able to handle it. Like, it's a reaction that happens to people, no matter the situation, that sometimes can be hard to then say, yeah, but I have to do, like, I still have to take the steps. For you, what was that like as you started to transition from the, okay, they don't have it as bad as me, or they don't understand, because it's different. Everyone goes through different experiences. No two
Right.
people are the same. And start to transition to, okay, let me still work everything. Because especially with people struggling with a, some form of substance abuse, alcohol, like whatever it might be, that can be hard overall as well.
Of course. Um, I think that 2023, these last 10 years, especially, the stigma of substance abuse has gotten a lot better. It's not great, but it's gotten a lot better. However, um, the the biggest struggle is and was, and I guess honestly on a daily basis still is, etching out my ego from everything, trying to take my ego out of the equation. And it's difficult. I think, especially being a millennial, we have this nose to the grindstone attitude, of that's how we're going to succeed. We get down, we get dirty, and we really put in the work, and we push farther than the guy next to you. So taking my ego out of everything and realizing no matter how important I think my professional life is, it's not possible unless I'm okay up here and in here, right? And really breaking down, especially men's mental health, being okay with being a man, dealing with these things mentally, and not thinking that it made me weak or it made me less than. Realizing that it was okay that we all struggle with things, right? Taking my ego out of it was a complete game changer. And so, and that takes time. That takes time and it takes work. But until I was able to do that, like I was saying, until I was able to really show myself kindness, none of it was going to happen. And so I I really, one, try to be as compassionate to myself as possible. And then what ended up working for me in the long term is I realized that, especially getting out of real estate and doing all these things, I had so many less cravings and I felt so much better in my personal life when I felt like I was doing something that I enjoyed on a daily basis. You know, um, I I knew that when I was completely engaged with my family and my friends and what I was doing at work every day, that I felt better inside. If I'm if I'm being selfless, if I'm being selfless and I'm doing for others, rarely can I get myself in trouble. There was something when I first got sober that my one of my mentors said. He said, "The only person you're not allowed to hang out with is yourself." Because I'm my biggest critic. If I sit there
Mhm.
with myself all day, I will come up with a million reasons as to why I can't do anything, you know? And on the flip side, I walk into a boardroom and I think that I'm the smartest guy in the room, right? So they tell addicts that, we're egomaniacs with an inferiority complex. And I think to an extent we all are. We all are.
Mhm.
We all put on these facades and then sit back after the fact and say, "Oh, I could have done this better. I should have done that. Why didn't I say this? Why didn't I do this?" And so releasing yourself of that and really just giving yourself a break and realizing that there is no professional space for you if you don't have yourself right. So it's just so important, of course, to release the stigma of substance abuse, but also just allowing us all to explore our mental health and realize that we all need, it's not a matter of having things wrong with us. It's a matter of, in the same way that, you know, you don't start working out when you're 700 pounds, you work out to keep yourself healthy. The same thing goes for our brains and our hearts. We have to nourish who we are. I think it's the top, maybe Fortune 100 CEOs wake up in the morning at 4 a.m. and meditate, and get on the right mindset for the day. It makes a world of difference when you're good with you. If you're not good with you, I could sell water to a fish if I'm good with me. But if I'm not, I mean, might as well not even try.
And I think that's a really key point there of let the ego go and give yourself grace. It is
Yeah.
okay. I think sometimes, and I'm very much guilty of this, I will admit, I give everyone else grace. But then when it's time to be my critic, I will not give myself a second chance. I'll be like, why did you do that? And if I think I'm wrong and I didn't give myself grace, I will immediately apologize. Like I will be saying what I'm saying and backtrack it with an apology as I'm saying it. And that is something that I've worked through as a leader. It is something I've relied on my friends to call me out on and too, and that's part of it. As you grow professionally, personally, have people in your corner that will hold you accountable too. So when I start to do that, and I do it a lot less now, but when I used to do that, it got to a point where my friends would be like, "Stop, no, like, what are you doing right now? Stop apologizing. If that's how you think or you feel, say it and give yourself grace, reflect on it, do better next time." And it's interesting because I would say some of those things to them. Sometimes you can say it to them, you
Oh,
can
yeah.
step in their shoes and say, okay, this is how they're reacting. And my friends have always said to me, you're so good at that. You give so many people so many graces, so many chances. You always sit there and go, how are they feeling? Why might have they said that? Is it really what they meant? Oh, I'll just give them another try. It was a heat of a moment thing. But when it's myself, no. And sometimes you have to give yourself grace to feel what you feel, work through it, and just do better next time. And that is okay.
Yep.
I want to touch upon as you transitioned out of the rehab facility, you really found your passion. And you've mentioned that a few times of helping others, giving back, and what most people our listeners don't know is your degree you got in college is not specifically what you're doing today, which I think a lot of people have to understand. There's a lot of roads that you can take. And just because your degree says supply chain or it says engineering does not mean you can't apply your degree in other things you do. What made you decide that through your rehab time that you wanted to really put your time and energy into helping others? And what has that now, since doing that experience changed your mindset and your experiences and just the overall path that you're on?
Sure. It started as survival. It honestly started as survival. I got to a point where if I I got to a point where I could only stay sober during the day if I threw myself into helping other people.
Mhm.
And so, like many things, like you starting achieving success, it starts as a hobby, right? Or it starts as something small, and in my case, volunteering, and builds into, huh, maybe I can make a career out of this. Maybe I can do this. So that's really what it was. My degree was a double major in acting and business admin, which helps obviously with real estate. It's a lot of acting. It's a lot of being on your feet, and kind of on your toes at all moments. Um, but what I think it's as important to look at when I look at what college taught me, I also look at, what bad habits I also picked up while I was there that you don't even realize until you get into the workforce and you start ironing out these things that you thought you have this idea in your mind of what a professional is supposed to look like, and that's not the case. With being an acting major and with I was in theater my whole life. I went on tour in Edinburgh, Scotland when I was 16 and did a show for 2 weeks there. And so I was always super passionate about it. But I learned how to wear a lot of masks. And, I had a mask for everybody. I have a mask that I wear with my grandmother, with my mother, with my fiance, with my colleagues, with the grocery store clerk, with everybody. I used to say, I can be anybody you need me to be in any given moment. And although that helps when you're selling houses and it helps when you're trying to close a deal, it eats away at your own identity. You know,
Mhm.
you get to the end of the day and you say, who the heck am I? Because you're so many different things. So getting into the nonprofit world really became about survival because when I was constantly serving others, I wasn't thinking about what mask I was wearing. I wasn't thinking about how I was portraying myself to others. My main goal was and continues to be on helping other people. So I started by working with a nonprofit locally in Trenton called Kidsbridge. And what they do is they try to lower the ratio from school to prison. Um, the way that they do that is by teaching kids emotional management. You have these children that are dealing with these very um, adult issues, whether it's domestic abuse and violence, or their parents have substance issues, poverty, food insecurity. Uh, a lot of kids in some of the schools that we worked in were living out of the local shelters. These are things that no child should have to have on their mind while also just trying to learn. So going in and teaching them emotional management and how to not necessarily block off their emotions, but when they come in after a night where, for example, mom and dad are in a bad fight, or they're exposed to seeing drugs and alcohol in the house, or there's violence around them, or they didn't eat breakfast and dinner the last 12
Mhm.
hours. Having them come in and immediately having the resources to be like, okay, we're going to make sure that you get food in your belly. And we're going to make sure that we sit down for an hour and we talk about how you're feeling and we let you process that. And what the research was showing that they were looking at was that these kids, when they were dealing with these complex issues and having nowhere to put that energy, it was turning into anger. And
Mhm.
to no fault of their own, they were going down wrong paths simply because no one ever tried to help them unpack this trauma. And so that was their mission was very compelling to me because of what I had been through. And I have a history of abuse from my childhood. And so I know what it's like to come through adolescence with that trauma and not know how to process it, and in my case, end up, you know, with a substance abuse issue. Um, so I fell in love with that, and but I knew that my strength was in business, and I thought that I needed to meld this some way. And being the MacGyver, um, apprentice that I think I am, um, I thought the chamber was really the best space for me to get to explore what I really liked about social work, what I really liked about working for a nonprofit, finding the niches, and at the same time, getting to network with all of these brilliant people that have devoted their lives to helping others. And although a lot of that on the day to day looks like, maybe hurdling cattle a little bit to get an event together, at the end of the day, knowing that I'm using these skills that I already had to help others. It's not as if all day, every day, I'm sitting in the soup kitchen. I'm
Mhm.
using the skills that I did learn. I'm using my business skills and graphic design skills and communication skills, my real estate skills, my marketing and selling tools to reach that long-term goal. Being able to sit there knowing I'm doing this for a good reason is has been able to be the glue that melds together what I'm doing now and has made me happy with where I'm at.
And I think there's a few key takeaways there of the being happy with where you are and working through it. And I think no matter your age, no matter what the situation, you have to give yourself the time to unpack your emotions.
Oh,
You
yeah.
have to, if you don't work through it and realize, yes, I'm feeling this way, this is why I'm feeling that way, down the road, that's only going to hurt you. It might not hurt you today, it might not hurt you tomorrow, but it can hurt you and your relationships you have 10, 15 years from now. So the only healthy thing you can do is say, yeah, this is what's, why. And then if you might not be in the space in the moment to do that, or even within the week, whatever it might be, that is okay and acceptable. Let's make that clear. Sometimes there's reasons you're not in the place to do that. But at some point, you have to say, yeah, this is what happened to me. This is why. And it can be when you are ready to go through it and you are ready to work on it and heal yourself, whether that's in a month, whatever it might be, of also saying, these are my triggers. So this is what is making me feel that way. And then work through those as well so that you devalue them to yourself. So then that does not trigger you. That doesn't bring up emotions that someone might even not know as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. And it's so important. I think it's important to realize that mental health and emotional regulation are not signs seeking out help for those issues are not signs of weakness. If anything, I owe a majority of my strengths to getting help. And initially getting help, I really thought my life was over. I really thought my business career wasn't going to happen and that I was never going to make it out of it. And of course, there was low moments, right? But if I hadn't gone through what I went through, the amount of people that I can now be at an event and, say, "Oh, yeah, it's funny you bring that up, like, I'm actually in recovery," or, "It's funny you say that, I have a connection with a sober house," or, "I can do this," or, "I can do that." I help more people on a daily basis with things that have practically nothing to do with my job, but are just from my personal experience. And without doing the work on myself, that wouldn't have been possible. But it's completely necessary. It's completely
Mhm.
necessary. If you ran a brick and mortar and you had an employee that was putting down the other employees, right? Kind of an inside out moment, like all your employees are your emotions. You would fire that employee for the betterment of your company, for your business, right? But we allow, these cancers in our mind to kind of just sit and fester because either one, we don't have enough time to deal with them, or two, we don't think we need to deal with them. And what happened in my case was that I didn't think they were a problem. I didn't need to deal with them. And of course, we never have the time to deal with things, right? And I don't have time. I'm too busy. And what happened was I was brought to my knees and forced to take the time. And wow, turns out I had a lot more time than I thought I was going to have. But it doesn't have to get to that point. You can deal with your emotional regulation on a nightly, weekly, monthly, yearly basis and still be successful and be on the track that you want to be on. It doesn't have to be this big thing. But I think it's important to note that if you don't deal with these things, it will eventually take you to your knees. These are things that as a human being, we all need to address and regulate.
For sure. And I like how you put that. If you don't take the time now, those few moments, whatever it might be, the hour, it will get to a point where it will take you to your knees and you will have to address it whether you like it or not. And that is really important to realize, to say, okay, I'm busy. I don't have time. But will you have the time when you have no other choice?
Right.
So, Mark, how can people get in touch with you if they would like to connect with you?
Well, obviously you mentioned my LinkedIn. My name's right up there on my Zoom square, but so it's Mark Troy, locally Hamilton, New Jersey. Um, More specifically for work, Princeton Mercer Regional Chamber of Commerce. So I'm on that LinkedIn page. You can also check out our website, princetonmercer.org. Um, if you ever want to reach out to me, I'm obviously an open book. So mark at princetonmercer.org as well. Um, I feel free to chat with anybody going through something, or you just want to connect and make a business connection. I'm all ears. So yeah, that is how you get in contact with Mark Troy.
Thank you, Mark, for all of your insight today. It was really
Yes.
powerful.
Yes, thank you, Olivia. It's a pleasure doing this. Really.
A few of our key takeaways from today's conversation are: sometimes moments happen where reflection can elevate you. Reflection and your situation can really put you in a spot where you can do something you might have been scared of. It can elevate you long term. Show yourself kindness. It is okay to show yourself kindness even when you might not think you did the right thing. Those can When you give it to everyone else, give it to yourself as well. Because at the end of the day, you have to be happy. You have to be okay mentally, emotionally, physically, and everything in between. Stop comparing and start relating. When you stop comparing yourself to everyone, especially nowadays with social media and everything else, a lot of people showed the good. They don't always show the bad. And so when you stop comparing yourself to everyone's A-list moments, if you want to put it, everyone's top moments or the best parts, and start reflecting on yourself and relating to everyone. And when you start relating, you can find out you have a lot more in common with someone than you might think. And you will be in a position to actually make connections and probably also eliminate some of the biases you might have, and biases towards yourself and biases towards others as well as when you take a moment to realize all of your past experiences has led you to be in a position today that can help others, that can help yourself, that has somehow all those experiences have molded into what you can bring to the table today. It will open your doors, open the community you have around you, open yourself up in more ways than you can even imagine. This was a great episode with our top-notch guest, Mark Troy. Thank you for listening and have a successful day.